The countdown clock ticked away, each second echoing like a drumbeat inside Elon Musk's head. He stood on the observation deck of SpaceX's launch complex, his eyes fixed on the massive rocket standing tall on the launch pad. It was a symbol of his dream, the dream to send humanity to Mars. But today, it wasn't just about the rocket. It was about everything that had led to this moment, everything he had sacrificed to get here. The mission to Mars was more than just another SpaceX project. It was personal. This was the culmination of decades of work, vision, and unyielding determination. Elon had often joked that he'd take his own ship to Mars if he could, but today wasn't a joke. Today, he was ready to board the first-ever crewed mission to the Red Planet. The engineers moved quickly, checking and rechecking systems. The atmosphere was thick with tension. A storm of excitement and nerves seemed to swirl through the air. There were no guarantees. The stakes were astronomical, literally. No one knew for sure what awaited them on Mars, and even fewer believed that humanity could conquer the challenges of interplanetary travel. Yet, here they were. They had done the math. They had built the technology. They had worked tirelessly to make the impossible a reality. And now, at this critical moment, everything hinged on a flawless launch. Elon's fingers drummed restlessly against the glass of the observation window as he watched the final preparations unfold. The sounds of technicians shouting orders, the hum of machinery, the occasional beep of a system check, it was all part of the grand symphony that would send them into the unknown. Suddenly, an alarm blared. The lights on the console flickered. His heart skipped a beat. "What's happening?" Elon asked, his voice sharp with urgency. "There's a fault in the fuel system, sir," one of the engineers replied. "It's a minor issue, but it'll take us an extra 15 minutes to fix." Elon felt the tightness in his chest. He hated delays. Time was always slipping away, and the pressure to succeed weighed on him with each passing minute. Mars was closer than ever, but so were the risks. "Is it serious?" Elon pressed. The engineer looked at the screen and nodded. "No. But we need to make sure everything's perfect before we launch. We can't afford to take chances." Elon sighed, rubbing his face in frustration. They had been through simulations. They had done everything by the book. But there was always the fear, what if something went wrong? What if this was all a mistake? What if, after all these years, they were not ready? But then again, when would humanity ever be ready? "Fix it," Elon said finally, his voice firm. "We launch on schedule. We don't stop now." As the engineers scurried to correct the issue, Elon's thoughts drifted. For a moment, he let himself remember how it all started. He thought of his childhood, of the young boy who read books about space with wide-eyed wonder. He thought of the dream that had consumed him for years, the dream to make life multiplanetary, to push beyond the boundaries of Earth, and to pave the way for humanity's future on Mars. His parents had never fully understood his obsession. They'd thought his desire to conquer space was a phase, something that would pass like all the others. But it never had. "Hey, Elon, you good?" a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president. She had been by his side for nearly every step of the journey, and she knew him better than anyone. "Yeah, just thinking," Elon replied, turning to face her. Gwynne gave him a knowing look. "Don't worry. You've built something incredible. The world's watching, but you've done the hard part already. You got this." Elon gave a tight smile. She was right, in a way. The hard work had been done. The teams had perfected the rocket, the technology, the mission. Now, all that was left was to get on that ship and make history. The clock ticked closer to launch time. His pulse quickened. Each second felt like an eternity. "Ready for liftoff, Elon?" Gwynne asked, a teasing smile tugging at the corners of her lips. He glanced back at the rocket, his heart racing. Ready as I'll ever be. As the final systems checks came through, the rocket stood proud on the launch pad, ready to take its place in history. It wasn't just a rocket anymore. It was a vessel of hope, a beacon of possibility for the entire world. This mission wasn't just about Elon Musk or SpaceX. It was about humanity's future, about breaking the chains that bound them to Earth and reaching for the stars. The communications team confirmed the systems were all go. The countdown clock resumed its tick, now only minutes from launch. Then, another alarm went off. This one was more serious. Elon froze. What's happening? His voice, now a little shaken, cut through the tension in the room. The engineer's face was pale. Sir, there's been a critical issue with the rocket stabilization system. If we don't fix it in the next 5 minutes, we'll have to delay the launch. Elon's stomach tightened. This was the third problem they had encountered in the last 30 minutes. It was getting harder to ignore the gnawing worry in the pit of his stomach. Is it fixable? Elon asked, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, but it's risky, the engineer replied. We'll have to make a manual override. It's going to take time, and we'll have to rerun the diagnostics to be sure. Elon closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. This wasn't the time for doubt. If there was one thing he had learned over the years, it was that success didn't come without risk. And the greatest discoveries were made by those brave enough to face that risk head-on. Do it, he said, determination flooding his voice. We don't back down now. This is it. We're going to Mars. For the next few minutes, it was a blur of technicians running, buttons being pressed, and desperate whispers exchanged. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the systems were cleared. Launch in 10, 9, 8, the countdown resumed. Elon looked out at the rocket, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a rush of adrenaline as the engines roared to life, the earth beneath his feet trembling as the rocket began to rise. This was it. The journey to Mars had officially begun. But as the rocket ascended into the sky, Elon couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on the red planet. What would they discover? Would this be humanity's greatest triumph, or its greatest tragedy? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, the voice on the broadcast intercom echoed. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk stared at the sky, the flames of the rocket lighting up the darkened sky as it soared higher and higher, toward the unknown. And in that moment, one thing was certain, no matter what lay ahead, nothing would ever be the same again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the rocket hurtled toward the unknown, Elon Musk remained in the observation room, his eyes glued to the monitors tracking the spacecraft's ascent. His mind, however, wasn't on the mission itself. His thoughts wandered back in time, far before the first rocket ever launched, back to his childhood, the humble beginnings of the dream that had driven him to this moment. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon was a curious child. His mind was always at work, filled with questions about how things worked, how they could be made better. He could often be found with his nose buried in a book, reading about everything from science fiction to real-world physics. But it wasn't the pages of books that fueled his drive. It was the spark of wonder, the idea that something out there, beyond the confines of Earth, was waiting to be discovered. He remembered his father's harsh voice, telling him to stop daydreaming and focus on what mattered in the real world. His mother, too, had her reservations, urging him to think more practically, to follow a safer path. But from an early age, Elon was never one to follow the beaten track. At 12, he had taken apart his first computer, a Tandy TRS-80, and sold the parts for enough money to buy his first business, an online video game company he would later sell for a small fortune. But even as the money flowed in and out of his bank account, his heart was never really in the business ventures that had made him a millionaire. No, his heart was in space. The dream of space exploration was never far from his thoughts. Even when he was at the helm of PayPal, revolutionizing online payments, he was always looking up at the stars. That's when he began to set his sights on Mars. The idea of humanity becoming multiplanetary was an idea so bold, so audacious, that it seemed impossible. But for Elon, impossibility was simply a challenge waiting to be overcome. He had taken enormous risks, poured his fortune into SpaceX, and even put his own life on the line for this cause. He often spoke of his mission as though it were the only thing that truly mattered, because in his mind, it was. Colonizing Mars wasn't just a lofty dream, it was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. The Earth, in his eyes, was fragile, and if humanity didn't take steps to spread out, the future would be precarious. Elon glanced at the clock, marking another minute of the mission's successful ascent. But his thoughts remained locked in the past, and a familiar face popped into his mind, his old friend and one of his earliest collaborators, Dr. Daniel Mercer. Daniel had been with Elon since the early days of SpaceX, a brilliant scientist whose work in astrobiology and space exploration had helped lay the groundwork for what they were doing now. They'd shared countless late nights in the early days of the company, debating everything from rocket propulsion to the feasibility of terraforming Mars. But Daniel had always been the practical one. Where Elon saw infinite possibilities, Daniel saw the dangers, the risks. Their disagreements had never been personal, but they had been significant. Over time, Daniel had become more of a voice of caution, while Elon's vision had grown even bolder. As SpaceX expanded, so did their differences. Eventually, Daniel had left the company, preferring to work on other, less risky endeavors. Their paths had diverged, but not without a sense of unfinished business between them. Elon ran a hand through his hair, shifting in his seat. He hadn't spoken to Daniel in years, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his old friend might have been right in some ways. Was Mars the answer? Was this really humanity's best hope, or was it an expensive gamble with too many unknowns? Could he have pushed his vision too far, too fast? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a message from Gwynne Shotwell, his longtime president at SpaceX. She had always been the calm in the storm, and right now, Elon needed her steady hand more than ever. We're seeing some unexpected data. The rocket is performing better than anticipated. It's a good sign, but we need to be cautious. Talk to you soon. A wave of relief washed over him. The mission was off to a promising start, but he knew better than to get too comfortable. Space travel was unpredictable, and things could go wrong in the blink of an eye. Despite the progress, Elon couldn't help but think of the consequences of failure. If this mission were to fail, it wouldn't just be a setback for SpaceX. It would be a blow to his entire legacy. Mars wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a race against time. His entire life had been spent chasing this vision, and if he didn't succeed, what did it all mean? He thought of his children, XAE-A12 and Exadark Sidereal, his little ones, the most important people in his life. They were his future, his reason to keep pushing forward, even when the world seemed too uncertain. Would they one day look back at this moment and remember their father as a man who risked it all to ensure their future? Or would they see him as a fool who chased a dream to the detriment of everything else? Elon's fingers hovered over his phone for a moment, but he quickly dismissed the thought. Now wasn't the time for self-doubt. There was too much at stake, and too many people were counting on him. Gwynne, what's the latest? Elon's voice was calm, but his mind was still racing. We're good. Everything's smooth for now. We should be entering orbit soon. But we still have a long way to go. Good. Let's keep it that way, Elon replied, trying to steady his nerves. As he sat in the silence of the observation room, the enormity of the task ahead hit him again. The idea of sending people to Mars was no longer a concept on a drawing board. It was real. The risks were tangible. But so were the rewards. For all of humanity to survive and thrive, they needed to spread beyond Earth. Mars was just the first step. And the more he thought about it, the more Elon realized that this mission, this dream, was no longer just about him. It was about the future of everyone. Every breakthrough, every failure, every triumph would ripple through generations. This was his legacy. The mission was his mark on the world. And if he had to take risks, if he had to venture into the unknown to ensure humanity's survival, he would do it. No matter the cost. The rocket streaked through the atmosphere, its engines burning fiercely as it ascended higher into space. Elon Musk, still in the observation room at SpaceX headquarters, leaned forward, his eyes locked onto the monitors. The craft was passing the Kármán line, crossing the threshold where Earth's atmosphere met the vast expanse of space. His mind was focused, but his thoughts drifted again, back to the start of it all. The relentless work, the endless hours, the sacrifices. SpaceX had been founded with a single mission, to make space travel more affordable, more accessible, and, ultimately, possible for everyone. Elon had spent years searching for the perfect team, gathering the brightest minds in engineering, science, and technology. But no one, not even he, could have foreseen the challenges ahead. Even now, with Mars on the horizon, those challenges loomed larger than ever. As the rocket climbed higher, an unexpected issue arose, one that no one had anticipated. "Sir, we're receiving a drop in fuel pressure in one of the lateral boosters," an engineer's voice crackled over the communication system. Elon's body tensed. His first instinct was to downplay it, to brush it off as a minor issue. But he knew better than anyone that in space, there were no minor issues. Everything mattered. "What's the status?" Elon asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. "We're seeing a 5% drop in pressure, but it's not catastrophic," the engineer replied quickly. "We should still be able to reach orbit with a minor adjustment, but we're going to need to recalibrate one of the engines." Elon took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with. The reality of space exploration was that no matter how well prepared you were, things went wrong. And when they did, every second counted. He glanced at the clock. The mission was on schedule, but every passing moment increased the risk. Mars was still a long way off, but each stage of the journey had its own set of dangers. No one had ever attempted to send humans this far before. No one had ever dared to make Mars the next home for humanity. Yet, here they were, on the precipice of something extraordinary. "We're recalibrating the engines now," another voice chimed in from the control room. "We should have the issue resolved in 2 minutes, sir." Elon felt the briefest wave of relief wash over him. 2 minutes wasn't much, but it was enough to know they were still in control, for now. Despite his outward calm, he couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. He knew the risks intimately, the failures, the setbacks, the constant battle against the forces of nature and human error. But in moments like this, when it felt like everything was hanging by a thread, he had no choice but to believe in the mission. "Keep me posted," Elon said, his voice sharp but composed. The tension in the control room was palpable. Every eye was trained on the screens, watching as engineers worked furiously to resolve the fuel pressure issue. The countdown to Mars had started, and there was no turning back now. The crew aboard the rocket would face challenges they couldn't even imagine yet. Elon knew that in these moments, it wasn't just about technology, it was about trust. Trust in the people who had worked day and night to make this happen. Trust in the systems that had been designed to withstand the impossible. But most of all, trust in himself. Elon had often reflected on how far he'd come. It was a far cry from the early days of SpaceX when the company was struggling to stay afloat, with no guarantees of success. At the time, there were many who doubted his vision, people who thought he was chasing a pipe dream, that Mars was a fantasy too far out of reach. But now, here they were, on the verge of history. As the fuel pressure issue was resolved and the rocket stabilized, the crew on the ground took a collective sigh of relief. But Elon didn't allow himself to relax. Not yet. There was still too much to be done, too many unknowns that lay ahead. Hours passed, and the rocket reached orbit, pushing farther into space with each passing minute. But even though things seemed to be going according to plan, Elon couldn't ignore the nagging sense of uncertainty. There had already been one challenge, and he knew there would be many more along the way. The next step, traveling beyond Earth's orbit, would be fraught with difficulties. There would be solar radiation, cosmic radiation, and countless unforeseen obstacles. But none of those challenges compared to what awaited them on Mars. As the craft continued on its journey, Elon reflected on his mission's ultimate goal. It wasn't just about exploration. It wasn't about conquering another planet for the sake of glory. It was about ensuring the survival of humanity. Earth wasn't invincible. Climate change, political instability, and pandemics had shown just how fragile life on Earth could be. If humanity had any hope of securing its future, it needed to become a multiplanetary species. And Mars, the red planet, was the first step. But even as he thought about the bigger picture, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt. What if they weren't ready? What if the challenges on Mars were too great, too overwhelming to overcome? Elon, everything's holding steady now, Gwynne Shotwell's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. The trajectory is on track. We should be entering the Martian gravity well within the next few days. Elon nodded, though his heart didn't quite settle. There was still so much to do. And as much as he trusted the team, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mars would present challenges none of them were prepared for. Yet, despite the risks, despite the uncertainty, Elon Musk had always believed that the greatest triumphs came from facing the greatest challenges. The human spirit was boundless, and as long as there was a possibility, no matter how slim, that humanity could live beyond Earth, it was worth fighting for. I know, Elon said, his voice firm. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. The next few days would be critical. The journey to Mars had just begun, but already, the challenges of space were proving to be more complex than anyone had imagined. But one thing was certain, Elon Musk wasn't going to back down. The mission was bigger than any one person. It was bigger than SpaceX. It was the future of humanity. And no matter the obstacles, Elon would see it through to the end. The days blurred together as the spacecraft continued its journey toward Mars. Time seemed to move slowly when one was thousands of miles from Earth, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space. Elon Musk spent most of his time in the observation room, monitoring the ship's progress and reviewing data with the team. The challenges of the mission were always present, even if they weren't always apparent to the public. Gwynne, what's the status of the crew? Elon asked, his voice cutting through the hum of activity in the room. They're holding up well. Physically, they're in great shape. Mentally, it's a different story, she replied. The isolation and the long journey are starting to take a toll. They're adjusting to the new rhythm of space travel, but there are still moments of doubt. Elon nodded. He knew this wouldn't be easy, not just for the engineers and mission control, but especially for the astronauts on board. The journey to Mars was a solitary one, an endless stretch of time and space with no escape. Even the most rigorous training couldn't prepare them for the psychological toll of being cut off from the rest of humanity. I'll speak to them, Elon said after a pause. The conversation with the crew was brief, but it was an important one. As he spoke to the astronauts, for in total, he could hear the fatigue in their voices, the underlying anxiety of being so far from home. Remember why we're doing this, Elon said to them. You're not just out there for yourselves. You're doing this for humanity. This mission is more than just a journey. It's a step toward ensuring our survival. You're all pioneers of something that will change the course of history. There was a moment of silence, and then one of the astronauts, Captain Mia Chen, spoke up. We understand, Elon. But we're still human. It's hard being out here, day after day. No one on Earth can really understand what we're going through. Elon could feel the weight of her words. The isolation they were experiencing was something he could only imagine. But the truth was, he had no real answers for them. He couldn't offer them the comfort of home, nor could he promise that their sacrifice would be worth it. All he could do was remind them of the bigger picture, their role in securing humanity's future. "We're all in this together," Elon said, his voice resolute. "We've come too far to turn back now. Trust in the mission, trust in yourselves. You're the ones making this possible." As the conversation ended, Elon sat back, his mind still reeling from the enormity of what was happening. The journey to Mars wasn't just a physical challenge, it was an emotional and psychological one as well. And as the days stretched on, he knew that the hardest part was yet to come. In the meantime, the spacecraft continued its journey toward the Red Planet. The crew went about their daily routines, running experiments, checking systems, and maintaining the spacecraft. But even with all the preparations, the unknowns loomed large. Elon's thoughts often turned to what lay ahead once they arrived on Mars, what kind of challenges awaited them there, what risks they would face, and how they would handle the inevitable dangers of a hostile environment. The landing would be the first real test of their capabilities. The Martian surface was unpredictable. Dust storms, extreme temperatures, and radiation from the sun were just some of the hazards they would encounter. But none of that deterred Elon. He had always known that progress came at a cost. Humanity's survival wouldn't come easily, and he was willing to sacrifice everything to ensure that the dream of a multiplanetary future became a reality. But even with all the confidence and resolve he had, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. What if they weren't ready? What if their technology wasn't enough to protect them from the harsh Martian environment? What if this entire endeavor was doomed from the start? The thought was unsettling, but Elon quickly brushed it aside. There was no room for doubt. The mission had to succeed. And if they didn't make it, if something went wrong, he was prepared to take the fall. That was part of being a leader, he reminded himself. A true leader always took responsibility. 2 weeks passed, and the spacecraft was nearing its destination. The crew was growing anxious, but they remained focused, driven by the knowledge of the importance of their mission. Elon spent long hours in the command center, tracking their progress and keeping in constant communication with the team. The data was coming in fast, and every second felt like a countdown. "We're entering Mars gravity well," Gwynn said one afternoon. "We're on track for a landing in approximately 48 hours. Elon stood up from his chair and walked over to the large window overlooking the control room. The vastness of space stretched out before him, an endless void that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. And yet, Mars was closer now than ever before. A lifetime of work had led to this moment. Everything had been building up to this. He thought about the people who had supported him, his team at SpaceX, the astronauts, his family, and even those who had doubted him. Their collective efforts had made this possible. But even as they neared Mars, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The real challenges were still ahead. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. The spacecraft began its descent toward Mars, and every system was carefully monitored. The crew was preparing for the landing, donning their spacesuits and ensuring all equipment was in place. But even as they began the final approach, Elon couldn't ignore the tension that had settled over everyone. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "We're about to make history." The landing was set to be one of the most complicated maneuvers in space history. With the thin Martian atmosphere, precise control would be required to avoid any miscalculations. The slightest mistake could result in disaster. As the countdown to landing began, Elon's pulse quickened. This was the moment that would define everything, the culmination of years of work, effort, and belief. There was no turning back now. The final descent was tense, the spacecraft slowly lowering itself onto the Martian surface. The roar of the thrusters was deafening, and the crew's hearts raced in their chests. Elon's gaze never left the screen, his eyes fixed on the progress bar as they approached the landing site. The Martian landscape stretched out below them, alien and barren, but breathtaking in its stillness. And then, with a final burst of flame and a soft thud, they touched down. The room erupted in applause, but Elon's mind was already racing ahead, preparing for the next steps. The mission was only just beginning, and the real test was about to unfold. The Martian surface lay before them, quiet and still, bathed in the soft orange glow of the setting sun. The thin, dusty atmosphere barely touched the edges of the spacecraft, and the horizon stretched far beyond the reach of their eyes. It was a landscape unlike anything any human had ever seen, the ground covered in red soil, jagged rocks, and towering cliffs in the distance. It was an alien world, yet it was now home to humanity's greatest achievement. Elon Musk watched intently through the observation window of the control room at SpaceX headquarters, where his team cheered and high-fived each other. But his mind was with the crew on the ground. The spacecraft had successfully landed, but this was just the first hurdle. The real test would come once the astronauts stepped out and made their first human footprint on Mars. The comms crackled to life, and Elon's eyes shifted back to the screen. "Control, this is Captain Mia Chen. We've confirmed touchdown. We're preparing for EVA, starting the airlock procedures now." Elon nodded to himself. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. Humanity was about to take its first steps on another planet. It felt surreal, but at the same time, it felt inevitable. He'd always believed that humans could overcome the impossible. Mars was just another challenge to conquer. "I'm ready," Mia's voice came through the intercom. "We'll begin the walk in 5 minutes." Elon felt a rush of anticipation. The team had worked tirelessly to ensure every part of the mission was perfect. The landing was smooth, and the systems were stable. Now, all that was left was for the astronauts to make history. Mia's footsteps echoed through the spacecraft as she suited up. Elon could see her through the live feed. She was a picture of calm determination, but he knew she must be feeling the weight of the moment, the pressure of representing not just her crew, but all of humanity. With a deep breath, Mia walked to the hatch. She turned to her fellow crew members, sharing a quiet nod before gripping the release lever. The hatch slowly opened, revealing the barren landscape of Mars. The door hissed open, releasing a burst of air as the spacecraft's atmosphere adjusted to the Martian environment. "Ready for the first step?" Mia's voice came through the comms again. The anticipation in her voice was palpable. "Make us proud, Captain," Elon said, his words coming out before he could stop them. Mia smiled, and then, in a voice that carried all the weight of history, she said, "Here we go." She stepped out into the airlock, her boots crunching against the red Martian soil. The world watched as she moved toward the ladder leading to the surface. It was a slow, deliberate motion, each step calculated. Mia looked down at the soil beneath her feet. Mars. The same planet that had once seemed so far away was now at her doorstep. When Mia's boot finally made contact with the surface, a soft yet momentous sigh of relief swept through the control room. The entire world held its breath. "Mars," Mia whispered over the comms. "We've arrived. The first human footprint on Mars." It was a symbol of everything humanity had fought for: innovation, perseverance, and the drive to push beyond the limits of what was possible. Elon stood there, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his mind racing with thoughts of what this moment truly meant. He'd always believed in the importance of space exploration, but this moment, it felt different. It wasn't just about going to Mars, it was about humanity taking its first steps toward a future beyond Earth. A future that was no longer confined to the fragile bounds of a single planet. The astronauts began their routine checks, setting up their equipment for the first round of tests. They deployed the rover, began collecting soil samples, and started setting up the communication arrays. The air was thin, and every movement required careful thought and precise action. Every task was harder here, and yet every achievement felt like a victory. Elon could feel the excitement building within him, but there was also a quiet tension. Mars was an unforgiving world. The astronauts were in a race against time to set up a sustainable presence before they exhausted their supplies or encountered an unforeseen disaster. Each step, each piece of equipment, each test, it all had to go according to plan. But Elon wasn't one to shy away from challenges. He had spent years preparing for this moment, and SpaceX had put everything they had into ensuring the success of this mission. The crew had the best technology, the best training, and the best support they could offer. Still, there were risks that no one could predict, dangers no one could prepare for. Back on Earth, the world was celebrating, but Elon knew the real challenge was still ahead. Hours passed as the crew continued their work on the surface. The setup was going smoothly for the most part. The astronauts had completed the initial tests, collected soil samples, and set up the first base station. Yet, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The atmosphere on Mars was harsh and unpredictable. And while the technology was built to withstand the elements, Elon knew better than anyone that space exploration was filled with unknowns. "Elon, you might want to see this," Gwynne Shotwell's voice pulled him back to reality. He quickly walked over to the monitor, where the live feed from the astronauts was displayed. The scene was serene, too serene. The astronauts were setting up equipment, but something had caught their attention. Mia was standing still, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Captain, what's going on?" Elon asked, his voice suddenly tight with concern. "There's something out here," Mia replied. Her voice was calm but edged with caution. "It looks like movement. But it's distant, and we're not sure what it is yet." Elon's heart skipped a beat. What could it be? A dust storm? A fault in the terrain? Or something they couldn't even begin to comprehend? "Stay alert, Mia," Elon said, his mind racing. "Don't take any chances. We need to know what we're dealing with, but prioritize safety." "Understood, Elon. We're proceeding cautiously." Elon stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. It was a moment of profound realization. As much as humanity had worked to prepare for Mars, the red planet still held secrets, secrets that no one could have predicted. And now, they were on the brink of uncovering something far bigger than they ever imagined. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the screen. The first human footprint on Mars was just the beginning. The unknowns were about to become real, and the future of the mission, of humanity's place on Mars, hung in the balance. The silence in the control room was palpable. Elon stood by the large screen, watching intently as the feed from Mars flickered. Captain Mia Chen and the crew were still outside, cautiously moving toward the mysterious movement they had detected on the Martian horizon. The live feed showed Mia's suit-clad form, her steps slow and deliberate, as if she were walking on eggshells. "What do you think it is?" Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, asked softly, as if afraid to disturb the tense atmosphere that had settled over them all. "I don't know," Elon replied, his voice tense. "But I don't like the idea of them walking into something they can't understand. We need more information before they make any decisions." For the moment, the astronauts on the surface were on standby, waiting for further instructions. The world had already been watching their historic moment, the first human footprints on Mars, but this new twist, this unknown element, had the potential to derail everything. And with Elon's reputation, and the future of SpaceX, riding on this mission, the stakes were higher than ever. Captain Mia's voice came through the comms again, her calm but cautious tone carrying across the distance. "Elon, we're approaching the coordinates. It's strange. There's something metallic in the distance. A glint of light. It doesn't look natural. We're going to check it out." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Metal on Mars? That was impossible. The idea of something artificial existing on the red planet had never been a part of the mission's plans. Mars had been considered uninhabited, a barren wasteland that had once perhaps been capable of sustaining life but was now left to the elements. The possibility that something artificial could be there was not just unlikely, it was a fundamental game-changer. "Stay cautious," Elon urged, his voice tight. "If it's something you can't identify, back off immediately. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." There was a pause on the comms before Mia responded. "Understood. But we're going to get close. I need to know what we're dealing with here." Elon looked at the screen again, unable to look away. The world was watching, and there were millions of people glued to their screens, waiting to see what would happen next. A discovery on Mars, any discovery, was monumental. But the possibility that this was something otherworldly, something entirely unexpected, made it even more extraordinary. On the Martian surface, Mia and her crew continued to walk toward the source of the glint. The terrain was more difficult than they had anticipated. Rocky ground and deep dust storms made their path unpredictable. Their boots left deep impressions in the red soil, marking the ground where no one had stood before. As they advanced, the glint grew more visible, its metallic shine contrasting with the reddish tones of the planet. "What is that thing?" one of the astronauts, Dr. Kevin Patel, asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "I don't know," Mia responded, scanning the horizon with a mixture of wonder and caution. "But it's definitely not part of the terrain. This looks too symmetrical. Whatever it is, it's something man-made." They moved closer, and as they rounded a rock formation, what they had been seeing revealed itself in full. There, half buried beneath the dust and red soil, was an object that couldn't be mistaken for anything natural. It was a metallic structure, shiny, dark, and shaped in a way that suggested something deliberate. A piece of technology, perhaps, but whose? Mia crouched down and brushed away some of the Martian dust with her glove. The object was partly buried in the soil, as if it had been there for a long time. As she cleared away more of the dust, the shape of the object became clearer. It appeared to be a cylindrical piece, like a metal capsule, but much larger than anything a human would use for exploration. It was smooth, nearly seamless, and its surface bore strange markings, symbols or perhaps alien writing. "Mia, what do you see?" Elon's voice came through the comms, urgent now. "What is it? What's happening?" Mia's hand hovered over the object for a moment before she spoke again. "I think we found something, we're not alone." The words hit Elon like a blow to the chest. His heart raced, and for a moment, he couldn't process what he was hearing. Not alone. That was impossible. Mars had been explored for decades, and there had been no evidence of any civilization, human or otherwise. The idea that they were not alone on Mars, it defied everything they had prepared for. "What do you mean?" Elon asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Mia, explain." Mia took a deep breath. "There's something here. I don't know what it is. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. It doesn't look like it was left behind by any human expedition, and it's definitely not from the lander." Elon's mind raced as he processed the information. The implications were staggering. If this was some kind of alien technology, or even evidence of a previous civilization, it would change everything. It would rewrite human history, change the course of space exploration, and force humanity to reckon with the reality of extraterrestrial life. "Back off," Elon said, his voice low and urgent. "Do not make contact until we know more. This could be dangerous." Mia didn't respond immediately, and Elon's nerves flared. What were they dealing with? Could it be some kind of artifact, left behind by a lost civilization or perhaps even something from a species beyond Earth? As Mia and her crew carefully stepped back, they set up equipment to scan the object from a safe distance. The rover's cameras were deployed, sending high-definition images back to Earth. The more they scanned the object, the more questions arose. The markings on its surface were indecipherable, unlike any known language, but they seemed to pulse slightly, as if they were alive. Elon's mind raced with possibilities, but for the moment, he had to remain calm. There was no turning back now. What they had found would be the story of a lifetime. And he was right in the middle of it. The future of humanity on Mars, and perhaps even the future of life on Earth itself, was now tied to what happened next. He glanced at the clock, realizing how quickly time was passing. The world would be watching closely as the astronauts prepared to investigate further. The next steps were crucial, and Elon knew they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. For the first time in his life, he found himself wondering, was humanity ready for what they were about to uncover? As the hours passed, the tension back at SpaceX's control room grew unbearable. The scans from the Mars rover continued to flood in, and Elon stood frozen, eyes glued to the data. The markings on the object they had discovered, which had initially appeared to be simple etchings, were now proving to be far more complex than any of them had anticipated. In fact, the more they analyzed it, the more it seemed to show a level of sophistication far beyond anything humanity had created, or even theorized, on Mars. Gwynne Shotwell paced around the room, her face tight with concern. "Elon, what are we dealing with here? This doesn't make any sense. It's not just the design, it's the materials. We can't even replicate it with our current tech." Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing. The idea of discovering something alien on Mars was the stuff of science fiction, but now it was real. The object in front of their astronauts wasn't just an artifact, it was a piece of technology, and its complexity was overwhelming. It wasn't something humanity could have built, not with the knowledge they had today. Elon ran his hands through his hair, the weight of what they had uncovered pressing down on him like never before. "Gwynne, I don't know what this is. But we need to know more. I'm ordering the crew to continue their analysis, but we'll have to be cautious. This could change everything. I can't afford to take risks until we understand its full potential." Back on Mars, Captain Mia Chen and the crew had begun carefully documenting the object with their handheld devices, collecting data and taking more detailed scans. The object, now fully uncovered, gleamed under the harsh light of the Martian sun, casting eerie shadows on the rocky terrain. Despite their precautions, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something monumental. "Elon, we're getting results from the scans," Mia's voice came through the comms, strained with excitement. "This object is emitting something, some sort of low-frequency signal. It's not from the equipment. It's coming from inside." The team exchanged uneasy glances. If the object was actively emitting signals, that could mean only one thing: it wasn't inert. It was functioning, or at least it had been at some point. "What kind of signal?" Elon asked, his pulse quickening. "Is it a transmission? Could it be coming from an unknown source?" Mia paused for a moment, clearly analyzing the data herself. "It's not a transmission like." Mia paused for a moment, clearly analyzing the data herself. "It's not a transmission like we've seen. It's more like a pulse, rhythmic, almost like it's waiting for something. Like it's alive." The thought struck Elon with chilling clarity. "It's a message." The words echoed in the control room, and an eerie silence descended. What kind of message could this object be sending? Who, or what, was it communicating with? Mia's crew, standing a few meters from the object, took careful steps back. The discovery was too significant to approach recklessly, but the temptation to understand the truth was overwhelming. "We're going to try something," Mia announced, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We've already tested our communications array. Let's see if we can tune into that signal. If it's something we can decipher, maybe we'll understand its purpose." "Proceed with caution, Mia," Elon urged, his voice cutting through the static of the comms. "If it's active, we don't know how it'll respond to interference." But Mia was determined. "Understood. We'll make sure to keep our distance. I'll initiate the procedure now." The crew worked together to hook up their rover to a nearby array, amplifying the frequency to match the signal's rhythm. Their instruments began to buzz as the data came through. Seconds stretched into minutes as the team stared at the monitors, hoping for something that would reveal the object's purpose. Then, there was a shift. The pulse began to change. It wasn't just a steady rhythm anymore. It seemed to respond to their attempts to engage with it, growing in intensity. The crew stepped back, wary of what was happening. "Mia, stop," Elon barked, his voice sharp. "Something's happening. Get away from it now." It was too late. With a sharp, almost mechanical whine, the object suddenly shifted. It seemed to vibrate, and before anyone could react, the ground beneath the crew trembled. A low rumble resonated through the red soil, and a blinding flash of light exploded from the center of the object, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. "What the hell?" Kevin Patel shouted, stumbling backward. The crew scrambled, rushing to get behind the rover and away from the source of the energy. The light faded, but the tension in the air remained. The vibration stopped. The ground stilled. What in God's name just happened? Mia whispered, still shaken. Elon stood frozen in the control room, his mind racing as he processed what had just occurred. Had the object activated itself? Or had it simply been responding to their attempts to communicate? One thing was clear, whatever was happening, they had just triggered something far beyond their control. "Mia, get back to the lander," Elon ordered, his voice a mix of urgency and fear. "We don't know what's going on, but we need you and the crew safe. Return immediately." "We'll head back right now," Mia confirmed, her voice calm but underlined with the tension of the unknown. "But we need more answers. Whatever this is, it's not just an artifact. It's something more." Back on Earth, the implications of what had just transpired were already beginning to sink in. The data from Mars was being relayed to NASA and various international space agencies, and the world began to take notice. What had been a moment of human triumph, the first human landing on Mars, was now marred by the mystery of an unknown object that could be far more than just a relic. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. Whatever the object was, it was not just a piece of alien technology, it was a signal. A sign that Mars might not be as empty and desolate as they had all assumed. But what did it want? What message was it trying to send? And perhaps more importantly, was it a warning? "I've made contact," Elon muttered to himself, his fingers trembling slightly as he reviewed the latest data. The gravity of the situation was slowly dawning on him. But the real question is, who, or what, is on the other side? The crew returned to the lander, their minds filled with more questions than answers. The metallic object remained silent now, its mysterious signal cutting off as suddenly as it had started. But the questions lingered. And as Elon looked out over the horizon, the red planet before him, he couldn't help but wonder, was Mars just the beginning? Or had humanity unknowingly crossed into something far greater, something that would change the course of human history forever? The news spread like wildfire across the globe. What had begun as an unprecedented scientific achievement, the first human landing on Mars, had quickly escalated into something far beyond anyone's expectations. The world was captivated. The discovery of an alien artifact, or at least what appeared to be alien technology, on the Martian surface was all anyone could talk about. News outlets around the world were flooded with headlines: "Mysterious object found on Mars, humanity's biggest discovery yet," "Elon Musk's Mars mission takes unbelievable turn," "Alien technology," and "What lies beneath the red soil, Mars holds secrets humanity can't yet understand." In the control room back at SpaceX, Elon watched as reporters swarmed outside, capturing every possible angle of the unfolding drama. Gwynne Shotwell paced the floor, her face a mixture of frustration and concern. Elon knew the pressure was building, not just from the media but from governments, scientists, and space agencies across the world. "We need answers, Elon," Gwynne said, her voice low but intense. The whole world is watching us. You've opened Pandora's box, and now you need to decide what to do next. The last thing we need right now is a global panic. Elon, whose mind had been racing since the object first activated, remained eerily calm. I know, Gwyn. But we can't rush into this. We don't even understand what we're dealing with yet. We need to gather more data before making any decisions. His eyes flicked to the screen, where images from Mars were being relayed in real time. The object had been carefully catalogued, but the strange signal it had emitted still puzzled scientists. No one could decipher its meaning, and the longer it remained unexplained, the more speculation grew. Some believed it was proof of extraterrestrial life. Others thought it was an ancient human artifact that had been left behind on Mars millions of years ago. Meanwhile, social media was abuzz. Hashtags like #MarsMystery and #AlienTechnology trended worldwide. The conspiracy theorists had their own ideas, and the fear of an alien invasion began to take root in certain corners of the internet. Elon knew that as much as the world was in awe, there was also a growing unease. People feared the unknown, and rightfully so. Back at the Mars base, the astronauts were taking a cautious approach. The object, though still dormant, remained a focal point of their mission. The strange pulse had stopped, but the team knew it was only a matter of time before something else happened. They couldn't just sit idly by and wait. Mia's team had been trained to handle extreme situations, but this was beyond anything they had prepared for. We need to conduct another series of scans, Mia said, speaking to her crew as they huddled inside the lander. We don't fully understand what we're dealing with. I don't want to take any risks. Let's see if we can learn anything new before we try to engage again. Dr. Kevin Patel nodded. I agree. We don't know if it's safe to get too close. What if the object was a sort of trigger? What if interacting with it activates something we can't control? It could also be a message, Mia responded, her gaze distant as she stared at the screen showing the object's last recorded pulse. We have to figure out what it wants. If it's been dormant for this long, why wake up now? Why us? Before anyone could respond, the comms buzzed to life again, this time with a call from Earth. Elon, Mia, this is NASA. We've been analyzing the data from your last transmission, the voice on the other end said. We need to talk about your next steps. The implications of this discovery are massive. We've already mobilized a team of experts, but we want to make sure you're handling the situation properly. The entire world is watching, and the pressure is mounting. Elon, who had been listening in from Earth, immediately leaned forward. What do you suggest, NASA? We recommend a full investigation into the object, the voice on the comm said. But you need to take extreme caution. We're still gathering data here, and we've detected an anomaly in the electromagnetic fields around the object. It's not behaving like anything we've seen before. Our top scientists are still analyzing, but we believe this could be more than just a relic. Elon glanced at the control room, his mind working overtime. This was becoming bigger than he ever imagined. The world had its eyes fixed on Mars, and now it wasn't just about landing there, it was about what they had uncovered. This discovery could alter humanity's future in ways no one could predict. We'll proceed cautiously, Elon finally said, his voice steady. But we're not backing down. I'm going to make sure the world understands the gravity of this situation. As the hours passed, both the crew on Mars and the control room on Earth worked together to formulate a plan. The data was coming in from all directions, but so far, none of it offered any concrete answers. The pulse from the object had ceased, and all attempts to communicate with it had failed. However, there was something unsettling about the silence. The longer it stayed dormant, the more it seemed to be waiting. Waiting for what? Back on Earth, scientists and experts from around the globe gathered in virtual conferences, trying to make sense of the signals they had received. Some suggested it was an ancient technology left behind by an unknown civilization. Others theorized that the object might be part of a larger network, a kind of intergalactic communication device, perhaps. Elon watched as the speculations began to spiral. The world was on edge, and no one knew what the truth was. Was this an alien artifact? A forgotten relic from Mars' ancient past? Or was it something far more dangerous? In the midst of all this chaos, one question remained: what did this discovery mean for the future of humanity? Elon stood in front of the control room, eyes focused on the giant screen displaying the live feed from Mars. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders. But in the back of his mind, he knew there was no turning back. He had always dreamed of reaching Mars, but now that they had uncovered something so profound, everything had changed. Mars was no longer just a destination, it was a doorway. A doorway to something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The weeks that followed the discovery on Mars were some of the most intense in human history. The world had never been so united, or so divided, over a single mystery. Elon Musk, SpaceX, and the astronauts on Mars were thrust into the global spotlight, with every detail of their work analyzed and scrutinized. Theories spread like wildfire, from the possibility of an alien civilization once existing on Mars, to the idea that the mysterious object was part of an extraterrestrial communication network. Despite the overwhelming global attention, the object on Mars had remained silent. The signal that had once pulsed and vibrated beneath the Martian surface had ceased. All attempts to reactivate it or communicate with it had failed. For days, there had been no sign of any further activity. Scientists and engineers were starting to wonder if they had been too hasty. Had they misunderstood the object? Was it not a communication device after all, but merely an ancient artifact? Elon refused to believe it. His instincts told him there was more to the story. Back on Earth, the pressure was mounting. Governments around the world were demanding more answers. What was the object? Was it dangerous? What did it want? The fear of the unknown was palpable, and Elon could feel it tightening its grip on humanity. In the control room at SpaceX, Elon was meeting with Gwynne Shotwell and a select group of top scientists and engineers. The air was thick with tension as they reviewed the latest data from Mars. The team had been working around the clock, but despite their best efforts, they hadn't been able to decipher the object's signal or reactivate it. "Is there anything new?" Gwynne asked, her voice sharp with impatience. Elon stared at the screens, deep in thought. "No, nothing. But I'm convinced it's waiting for something. It's too precise, too deliberate. If we could just understand its pattern, we might be able to make contact." Gwynne sighed, clearly frustrated. "We don't have the luxury of time, Elon. The world is losing patience. We've got people calling for military intervention, others saying it's a sign of an impending alien invasion. We need to act, and we need to act now." Elon paused, his gaze never leaving the screen. "I'm not going to let fear drive us into a decision we'll regret. We need to understand this, not react impulsively. Let's take a different approach. What if the signal isn't random? What if it's a message?" "You mean, like an encoded message?" Gwynne asked, her interest piqued. Elon nodded. "Exactly. Maybe it's been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. We need to analyze the signal as though it's a coded message, not just a random pulse. I'll have the team set up a new task force focused on decoding it." Gwynne crossed her arms. "And what if we're wrong? What if it's a trap? We could be dealing with something beyond our control." "I don't believe that's the case," Elon said firmly. "We've taken every precaution. If we're careful and deliberate, we might just uncover something that will change everything." Meanwhile, on Mars, the astronauts had begun their own analysis of the object, focusing on the area around it. The rover's scans had revealed small, intricate patterns etched into the surface of the artifact, unlike anything they had ever seen. These weren't just random marks, they were systematic, and they seemed to form a complex, geometric structure. Mia Chen, the mission's commander, was the first to suggest that the etchings might be more than just ornamental. She huddled with her team, examining the images on their monitors. These symbols, they don't look like any natural formations. They look deliberate, purposeful. They might be some kind of language. I've been thinking the same thing, Dr. Kevin Patel said, his voice filled with excitement. If these markings are indeed a form of language, we might have a breakthrough on our hands. But we need more data. We need to analyze these symbols further. Elon's voice crackled through their comms, reassuring them from Earth. Mia, Kevin, I want you to continue your analysis. You're on the right track. If those symbols are a form of communication, it could be the key to unlocking the object's purpose. Take your time, but be methodical. We don't want to make any rash decisions. Mia nodded, her face determined. Understood, Elon. We'll proceed carefully. As they studied the markings, the team realized that the symbols weren't just random, they were part of a repeating pattern. Dr. Patel's heart raced as he ran the data through their systems, comparing it to every known language and cipher humanity had developed. It was a long shot, but they had to try. Hours passed, and the team continued to work tirelessly. Then, as if by sheer luck, they discovered a correlation. The symbols appeared to represent something not of this world, but familiar. It was a form of communication that seemed to combine both mathematical and linguistic elements. And as the pieces fell into place, they realized they were staring at the first true message from Mars. It wasn't a long message, but its significance was overwhelming. The translation was simple, yet profound. We are watching. We have always been. The crew stood in stunned silence. The realization of what they had uncovered hit them like a freight train. The object wasn't just a relic, it was a warning. Someone, or something, had been watching Mars for longer than humanity could comprehend. Back on Earth, the translation was relayed immediately. As the news spread, a chilling sense of fear began to spread across the globe. What did the message mean? Who had left it? And why had they been watching humanity? In the days that followed, experts scrambled to understand the meaning of the message. Was it a warning from an ancient civilization? Was it the first sign of extraterrestrial life, or something far more mysterious? Elon knew one thing, this was only the beginning. The message had been sent for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it wasn't going to be easy to uncover. The mystery deepened, and the pressure mounted. The world had heard the message, and now they wanted answers. But Elon wasn't about to make any rash moves. He understood that the truth, whatever it was, could change everything, and he needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The translation of the Martian message sent shockwaves around the world. The phrase, "We are watching. We have always been," was cryptic and ominous. The world, now united in fear and curiosity, demanded answers. Scientists, politicians, military leaders, and ordinary citizens alike found themselves at the mercy of questions they had never imagined they would have to answer. Back at SpaceX, the control room was a hive of activity. The message had reached every corner of the globe within hours, and Elon Musk's phone was ringing non-stop. Government officials wanted to speak with him. Press agencies were relentless. Every major news outlet had representatives camped outside SpaceX headquarters, waiting for the next big development. Gwynne Shotwell, standing beside Elon, noticed the exhaustion on his face. "Elon, we've got a problem. We're being pulled in too many directions. Everyone wants to know what comes next. The pressure is becoming unbearable. We need to take control of this narrative." Elon rubbed his temples, trying to focus. He knew she was right. The world was demanding answers, but there was still so much they didn't understand. We have to be strategic. We can't rush this. The message, it could mean something profound. I want a team of top linguists, engineers, and astrophysicists on this. We need to break it down further, every word, every nuance. And I need to make sure we have a clear plan for what to do next. But what do we tell the public in the meantime? Gwyn asked. The media is already speculating. Some are calling it the first sign of extraterrestrial life. Others think it's a hoax. What if this gets out of hand? Elon paused. We stay calm. We acknowledge the message, but we don't panic. We say what we know, that we've discovered an alien artifact, that we've made contact with something we don't fully understand, but that we are proceeding cautiously. People want answers, but we're not going to give them half-truths. Gwyn nodded, though her expression remained tight. I'll work on a statement for the media. On Mars, the discovery of the message set the astronauts on edge. Mia Chen stood in the command module, staring at the translation displayed on the screen. The words haunted her, and she could feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just a simple communication, it felt like a warning. Something ancient, something beyond their understanding, had been watching. This changes everything, Mia said, her voice unsteady as she turned to her team. What do we do now? We know we're not alone on Mars. But how do we proceed with this knowledge? Dr. Kevin Patel, the team's scientist, spoke up, his voice steady despite the growing uncertainty. We need to finish our analysis. There might be more to this message. Maybe we're missing something. I'll run some more scans of the object, see if there's any further data we can gather. But, we need to prepare for the fact that this could be much bigger than any of us anticipated. Mia nodded, swallowing her anxiety. We'll proceed with caution. But I agree. We need to know more about the source of this message. Why is it here? And why now? As Mia and her team continued to analyze the mysterious object, Elon Musk was busy coordinating with global leaders from Earth. The threat of panic loomed large. The unknown was always terrifying, but this felt different. This wasn't a distant UFO sighting or a scientific anomaly, it was something tangible, something that had been left on Mars by an unknown entity. The fear and fascination around the discovery were palpable. Reports of military movements in various countries surged, as governments became increasingly concerned about the implications of the discovery. The message left behind on Mars wasn't just an alien communication, it was a reminder of the vast unknowns that still existed in the universe. Back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon had scheduled a live broadcast to address the world. The pressure was immense, and every word he spoke could either calm the situation or make it worse. The room was dim, with only a few people present, Gwyn, a few key advisors, and the team preparing for the broadcast. Elon's mind raced. He knew that what he was about to say would shape humanity's understanding of what they had just discovered. The weight of it all felt heavier than any rocket he had ever launched. When the cameras started rolling, he took a deep breath and spoke. Good evening. As many of you know, we've discovered something extraordinary on Mars. A message. A message that was left behind by an unknown source, something or someone that has been watching our planet, and perhaps even our species, for far longer than we can comprehend. While this discovery is deeply unsettling, it's also an incredible opportunity. We've learned that we are not alone in the universe. But we must approach this with the utmost caution and respect. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. We've spent years preparing for this moment. The discovery of alien life or technology was always a possibility, but it's now a reality. This message, which we've translated as, "We are watching. We have always been," is not just a greeting. It's a warning. We do not know who, or what, is watching, but it's clear that we are being observed. Our next steps are critical, and we will proceed carefully, with the world's safety and security in mind. Elon looked directly into the camera, his eyes intense. I promise you, humanity will face this challenge together. We will share everything we know, and we will move forward as one. This is a defining moment for our species. We can't afford to be paralyzed by fear. We must look ahead with curiosity, determination, and unity. As the broadcast concluded, the world was left in stunned silence. The message had been received, humanity had heard from Mars, and the news was no longer speculative. The truth was out. There was something, or someone, watching from afar. Around the globe, reactions were mixed. Some people took comfort in Elon's calm and determined leadership, while others were filled with dread. Governments began meeting in secret to discuss their responses. Military forces were put on high alert. And in the streets, people gathered, discussing what they had just heard. Some were hopeful that this message meant a breakthrough in human progress, while others feared the implications of what had been uncovered. Back on Mars, Mia and her crew began to prepare for the next phase of their mission. The astronauts' roles had changed. They were no longer just exploring a distant planet, they were now the guardians of a great secret. The message was only the beginning, and what came next could shape the future of humanity. "We've opened a door," Mia said quietly to Kevin as they gathered their equipment. "And I don't think we're prepared for what's behind it." Kevin's eyes were filled with both awe and concern. "No one is. But we have no choice but to keep going." And so, the journey continued. Humanity had made contact with something beyond its understanding. The question now was, what would it do with the knowledge it had gained? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The world was on edge. The broadcast from Elon Musk had sparked a mix of awe, fear, and wonder. Governments scrambled to formulate responses, while ordinary citizens tried to digest the revelation that they were no longer the only conscious beings in the cosmos. The message had ignited a firestorm of speculation. Who was watching? What did they want? And, most importantly, why had they contacted humanity now? In the days following the broadcast, the world's attention remained fixated on Mars. SpaceX's mission to the Red Planet had become the center of global attention. The astronauts on the surface were no longer just explorers, they were humanity's first representatives in the face of an unknown force. And every word they sent back to Earth carried the weight of an uncertain future. Back at SpaceX, Elon Musk was feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His phone had been ringing off the hook, with calls from world leaders, scientists, and even the heads of various defense agencies. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: what was the next step? What should humanity do with this knowledge? Elon had spent the better part of the last few days locked in meetings, coordinating with experts and policymakers. But despite all the discussions, there was still no clear path forward. The object on Mars, the one that had sent the message, had not shown any further signs of activity. It was as if it was waiting for something. Or perhaps, as many feared, it was a trap. Gwynne Shotwell, always the pragmatist, stood by his side, her expression tense. "Elon, we need to make a decision. People are starting to panic. They're looking to us for leadership, and right now, we're running out of answers. What's our next move?" Elon ran his fingers through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. I know. But we have to be careful. We can't just react to the fear. If we're too hasty, we could make the wrong call." The message, it wasn't hostile. It wasn't threatening. But it wasn't exactly friendly, either. "We need to understand it fully before we make any moves." Gwynne didn't seem convinced. "And what if the silence continues? What if we never get any more answers from Mars? What if we're just sitting on this information and nothing changes?" Elon's gaze hardened. "Then we'll find a way to make it change. But not by making rash decisions." Meanwhile, on Mars, the astronauts were dealing with a new kind of pressure. Mia Chen stood in the habitat module, staring at the transmission screens. The silence from the mysterious object was deafening. After the message had been decoded, it had stopped sending any signals. For days, nothing. Not a single new transmission. Mia wasn't sure what to think. The message had been clear: we are watching. We have always been. But why had it stopped? Was it waiting for something? Or was it just a one-time communication? Dr. Kevin Patel approached her, his face pensive. You know, Mia, I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning. Whatever this is, it's bigger than we thought. Mia turned to him, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? We've decoded the message. It's a warning, a signal that we're being observed. But after that, we don't have anything to go on. Kevin paced, clearly deep in thought. That's just it. The message wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea for help. It was just a statement: we are watching. It's almost like they've been here for a long time, and now they want to see how we react. Mia nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation settling deeper into her bones. And if they've been watching us all this time, what happens when they're ready to make their next move? They both fell into a heavy silence. The unknown stretched before them, vast and incomprehensible. They had only scratched the surface of something enormous, and every new piece of information only raised more questions. Back on Earth, the political landscape was becoming increasingly fraught. World leaders were trying to balance public fear with the need to appear strong and capable. The United Nations convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of the message. Military and intelligence agencies were placed on high alert. The message from Mars had ignited a global conversation about the potential risks of alien contact, and many governments had begun to prepare for any eventuality. In Washington, D.C., President Emily Rodriguez addressed the nation, trying to calm fears and provide a sense of control. My fellow citizens, what we've learned from Mars is nothing short of extraordinary. We are not alone in this universe. The message that was sent to us is an important discovery, and we will continue to monitor it closely. But rest assured, we are taking every precaution to ensure the safety and security of our country. We will not make any rash decisions. As her speech echoed across the airwaves, many were left wondering, was she being honest, or was there something more being kept from the public? Could humanity truly trust the government's assurances, or was there a deeper conspiracy at play? Meanwhile, SpaceX was preparing for another mission to Mars. The team had been working on a new rover, a more advanced model, designed to investigate the object that had sent the message. But this time, they weren't just looking for answers. They were looking for a response. Elon Musk had authorized the development of a new, experimental rover that would attempt to send a signal back to Mars. It wasn't just a routine exploration. The goal was to establish two-way communication with the object on the Martian surface. The team at SpaceX had been testing the rover's capabilities, ensuring that it could withstand the harsh conditions of Mars while also transmitting data at unprecedented speeds. They also worked on a series of messages, lines of communication that were designed to get a response from the Martian artifact. But the real question was, would the object respond? Or had it already said all it needed to? Elon Musk watched the progress from Earth, his eyes fixed on the screens in front of him. If we get a response, it changes everything, he muttered under his breath. Back on Mars, the astronauts continued their preparations for the new rover's arrival. The crew felt the pressure mounting as they worked to ensure the success of the mission. The next step would be crucial, not only for SpaceX and humanity's understanding of the universe but also for their own survival. We're not just explorers anymore, Mia said quietly to Kevin as they worked late into the Martian night. We're humanity's first line of contact. The world is depending on us to make the right call. Kevin looked at her, his face filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. And I think we're ready. But we have to be prepared for whatever comes next. And no one was certain how the story would end. The silence on Mars stretched on, and with each passing day, the pressure on Earth grew. The message, "We are watching. We have always been," had set in motion a series of events neither the astronauts nor the world's leaders could have fully anticipated. The object on Mars still sat dormant, seemingly indifferent to the world's mounting questions. Yet, this silence was not a sign of peace. It felt more like an ominous calm before a storm no one was prepared for. At SpaceX headquarters, Elon Musk was becoming increasingly anxious. The world's eyes were fixed on Mars, but the astronauts were only sending back more questions than answers. Despite all the technology at their disposal, no one had been able to get the object to respond to any further attempts at communication. Elon sat in the war room at SpaceX, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Gwynne Shotwell stood beside him, scanning the screens that displayed live data from Mars. "Elon, the rover's about to land," she said, her voice steady, though there was a noticeable edge to it. "We've prepped the team. If this rover doesn't get a response, I don't know how much longer we can keep the public calm." Elon leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the screen, as though willing the rover to work. "If it doesn't respond, we'll have to consider a different approach. Maybe we're missing something. There has to be a reason it hasn't reacted. Or maybe we're not supposed to know," Gwynne suggested. "Maybe the silence is intentional." Elon's eyes widened slightly. "Intentional? What do you mean?" Gwynne gestured toward the rover's data feed. "The object, it could be waiting for something specific. Maybe it doesn't want to engage unless we've unlocked something more than just a surface-level transmission. What if there's a deeper code we haven't deciphered yet?" Elon's thoughts raced. He had been so focused on immediate contact, on sending back a reply, getting a response, that he hadn't fully considered the possibility that the object might be waiting for something more. A key, a piece of a larger puzzle. Back on Mars, Mia Chen and her team were still working diligently to prepare for the rover's descent. The weight of the world's expectations bore down on them as they set their instruments and waited for the rover's data to arrive. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they were missing, something essential that would explain the silence from the object. As the rover landed, the team watched closely. A few minutes passed. Then, on the screen, a single line of text appeared, blinking repeatedly, "Code unlocked." Mia's heart skipped a beat. What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kevin Patel, the team's scientist, quickly began analyzing the data. This isn't just a message. It's a sequence of symbols. The rover has uncovered something, some kind of hidden code inside the object's surface. It's not a typical response. Mia frowned, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Can we break it down? Translate it?" "I think so," Kevin replied, already deep in the analysis. "But it'll take time. We're not just looking at a simple message anymore. This is something much more complex." As the team worked tirelessly to decrypt the code, Mia couldn't help but feel an eerie sense of anticipation. Whatever they uncovered next could change everything. This wasn't just a message from another civilization, it was a puzzle, a riddle left for humanity to solve. And it felt like they were on the verge of unlocking something monumental. Back on Earth, the world watched with bated breath. The news channels were ablaze with reports about the rover's findings. Everyone wanted to know what the hidden code meant. Was this another warning? A clue to the object's true purpose? Or something even more mysterious? In Washington, President Emily Rodriguez convened a special session with her advisors. "We need to understand what this code means," she said, her voice calm but laced with concern. "If this is the key to unlocking further communication with whoever, or whatever, is on Mars, we have to be prepared. The last thing we need is to act without knowing all the facts." Her military advisor, General Thomas Hayes, stood by the large map of Earth's satellite systems. "Ma'am, I agree. But we need to be cautious. There are countries out there, China, Russia, that are already mobilizing their space programs. If this code means something important, we need to get ahead of them. We can't let this become a race for control over Mars." President Rodriguez nodded. "We'll act, but we'll do it together. We need to involve the UN, and every nation with a stake in this. This can't be just about one country or one corporation. Humanity needs to come together on this. But behind closed doors, not everyone shared her optimism. Some believed that humanity had just opened a door they weren't ready to walk through. The question wasn't just what the code said, it was what it meant. As Mia and her team worked to crack the code, a pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just random symbols or a sequence of numbers. It was a map. A map of sorts, with coordinates spread across the surface of Mars and, curiously, beyond. There were markers that seemed to point to other locations that could potentially hold more pieces of the puzzle. Mia felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the screen. This is it. This isn't just a warning. It's a map. It's telling us something. Kevin, still typing furiously, glanced up at her. A map? A map of what? Mia's mind raced. I don't know. But these coordinates, they seem to lead somewhere. Somewhere important. The realization hit her like a thunderclap, the object wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon, directing them to something far greater than they had ever imagined. On Earth, as the world held its breath, Elon Musk stood in front of a live camera, addressing the globe. The pressure was mounting, and the situation was becoming more critical with each passing hour. We've received new data from the rover, Elon said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. It's clear now that the object on Mars was more than just a simple artifact. It's a map, a guide to something greater. We're still deciphering the full meaning of the coordinates, but what I can tell you is that we are not alone in the universe. And the answers are out there, waiting to be discovered. Back on Mars, Mia and her team prepared to follow the coordinates. With each new discovery, the sense of urgency grew. The truth was out there, and they were going to find it. But the real question remained, was humanity truly ready for what it was about to uncover? The code had been unlocked. The message was no longer just a series of cryptic symbols but a map leading humanity towards something larger. The coordinates that had appeared on the rover's screen were scattered across the surface of Mars, and beyond. The map had piqued the curiosity of not only the SpaceX team and world leaders but also the public. The question now was not what the message said, but what humanity was going to do next. Back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon Musk was locked in a strategy meeting with Gwynne Shotwell and several key scientists and engineers. The room was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Elon had always been known for taking risks, but this felt different. This wasn't just a new rocket launch or a mission to Mars. We need to go to these coordinates, Elon said, his voice calm but firm. Whatever is out there, it's part of the puzzle. We need to get there before anyone else does. Gwynne crossed her arms. But Elon, the coordinates are scattered all over Mars. We don't even know what we'll find when we get there. These locations could be dangerous. What if they're not friendly? Elon nodded, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. I understand the risks, but we can't wait. The world is watching, and every day we delay gives someone else the chance to beat us to it. He turned to the team of engineers. Start preparing the next rover. We're sending it to the first set of coordinates. And we're going to need a crew ready to explore the locations when we get there. This mission is going to be our most important one yet. Meanwhile, back on Mars, Mia Chen and her crew were preparing for a mission unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. The rover had transmitted the map back to Earth, and now, the astronauts on the surface had the daunting task of determining what the coordinates meant in the context of their own exploration. Mia paced back and forth inside the habitat module, reviewing the map on the screen. The coordinates seemed to form a pattern, a trail, almost as if someone, or something, was leading them toward a specific location. She glanced at her team, all of them feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on their shoulders. This isn't just a map, Mia said, breaking the silence. These coordinates, they're guiding us toward something. Something big. We need to stay focused. Whatever we find out there could change everything. Dr. Kevin Patel, who had been analyzing the data for days, raised an eyebrow. Mia, I don't know if we're prepared for what might be out there. These locations, they could be ancient, they could be new, we don't know what's waiting for us. We need to be ready for anything. I know, Mia replied, her voice steady. But we don't have a choice. We're already here. And if the message means anything, it's that we need to be the ones to find out what's on the other side. The astronauts made their way to the rover's landing site, the first location marked on the map. The Mars landscape was barren, harsh, and cold, with endless stretches of red dust and jagged rock formations. There was no sign of life, nothing to indicate that anything out of the ordinary had ever occurred here. Yet the map had led them to this exact spot. Mia stepped out of the rover and onto the Martian soil, her boots crunching in the fine dust. The silence around her was suffocating, broken only by the hum of their suits and the faint beeping of the equipment. The wind howled faintly in the distance, carrying with it the scent of a planet that had remained untouched for millennia. Let's begin the search, Mia said, her voice calm but laced with determination. The team spread out, scanning the area with their tools. As they moved, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the barren landscape was hiding something. And just as she was about to call the team back together, she spotted something. A faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, near a rocky outcrop in the distance. Her heart raced as she approached the spot. The shimmer was not natural, it was metallic. She knelt down and brushed away the dust, revealing a strange object embedded in the ground. It wasn't a rock. It was a piece of technology, something advanced, something not of this world. Kevin. I think I found something, Mia called, her voice trembling with excitement. Kevin and the rest of the crew rushed over to her side. They stood in awe as Mia carefully examined the object, noting the strange symbols etched into its surface. It was smooth, almost flawless, with an energy pulse faintly radiating from it. This is incredible, Kevin muttered. It looks like some kind of device. But it's not like anything we've ever seen before. Mia's mind raced as she processed what she was seeing. Do you think it could be linked to the object that sent the message? This could be part of the puzzle, the final piece we were looking for. Before Kevin could respond, the object gave off a low hum. The energy pulse intensified, and a series of lights flashed on its surface. A voice, deep and mechanical, resonated from the object, speaking in a language none of them understood. Mia froze. The sound was unlike anything she had ever heard before, and it sent a chill down her spine. The object was alive, reacting to their presence. It was communicating. Back on Earth, the world was on edge. News reports were flooding in from SpaceX and the astronauts on Mars. The discovery was unlike anything anyone had imagined. The question was no longer whether humanity was alone in the universe, it was what kind of response humanity would get from this newfound intelligence. Elon Musk paced back and forth in the control room at SpaceX. The communication from Mars had been intercepted and transmitted to Earth, but the language was indecipherable. The mysterious voice sent a ripple of fear and excitement through the room. The unknown had become all too real. We need to decode this, Elon said, looking at the team of linguists and scientists gathered around. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Whatever it is, it's trying to communicate with us. One of the linguists, Dr. Sarah Lindgren, tapped away at her keyboard. This isn't just a language. It's a sequence, a pattern. We've seen something like this before, in ancient civilizations. They used patterns to encode messages. But this is unlike anything we've encountered. Elon's mind raced as the implications of what was happening began to settle in. This was no longer just a discovery, it was a challenge. Humanity was on the cusp of a new era, one where the answers to the greatest questions of existence might finally be within reach. Back on Mars, Mia and her team continued to study the strange object. Its lights flickered as if responding to their movements, and the mechanical voice continued its low hum, speaking in a pattern that seemed almost rhythmic. As the team worked, Mia realized that they weren't just exploring Mars, they were unraveling the greatest mystery humanity had ever known. And the deeper they went, the more they understood that this was just the beginning. The object, the map, the coordinates, they were all leading to something far greater. And whatever was coming next, humanity would have to face it together. The object's hum seemed to reverberate in the hearts of the astronauts and the millions of people watching from Earth. Its rhythmic pulse was more than just a sound, it was a signal, a beacon. For the first time in human history, the world was truly united in anticipation of what was to come. The mystery of Mars had deepened, and with it, a new sense of purpose had been born. Back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon Musk was pacing again. He had spent the past several hours watching the data coming in from Mars, but the urgency was beginning to settle into an uncomfortable feeling. The strange device on Mars had begun to emit an unknown energy pattern that none of the scientists had been able to explain. The longer the object continued its hum, the more unsettled Elon felt. It was as if something on Mars was waking up, and they were standing on the precipice of a revelation that could change everything. Gwynne Shotwell entered the room, her face taut with worry. "Elon, we've made progress. The linguists are working on the patterns from the voice, but they're struggling to decode it. The language, it doesn't fit any known systems we've studied." Elon stopped pacing and turned to face her. "So what does that mean?" "We have a message, but no way to understand it." "It's not just that," Gwynne replied, looking at the data screen behind Elon. "The object isn't just transmitting a voice, it's sending out an energy pulse that's growing stronger. It's as if it's calling for something, or someone. We don't know what it is, but we need to be careful. If it's trying to establish contact, we might be risking more than we realize." Elon clenched his fists. "I didn't start this to wait around. This object, this message, it's our next step as a species. Whatever happens next, we can't back down." Gwynne hesitated before responding. "I understand, but we have to approach this carefully. What if we're dealing with something far beyond our understanding? What if we're not the ones meant to answer it?" Elon's eyes narrowed. "If we don't try, someone else will. And I won't let that happen." On Mars, Mia and her team were feeling the same pressure. They had discovered something no one could have predicted, a piece of technology that was not of this world, and yet it was alive, responsive. It wasn't just a message, it was an invitation. But to what? What were they being led to? Every instinct told her they were on the edge of a momentous discovery, but it was impossible to ignore the deepening sense of unease that permeated the air. Mia's voice crackled over the comms. "Kevin, what do you think? Should we continue to engage? The object has been sending energy pulses for the last few hours. Do we risk interacting with it again?" Kevin hesitated before responding, his voice low. "I don't know, Mia. The data coming in shows a pattern, like the object's energy is responding to our movements. It feels intentional. I don't know if we're ready for whatever it's trying to tell us. What if it's a trap?" Mia could feel the weight of his words. "We can't go back now. We're already too deep. But we need to proceed cautiously. Let's activate the communication protocol again and see what happens." The team gathered around the object, their hands steady as they approached it, as if it were a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. Mia placed her hand on the device, feeling the vibrations pulse through her glove. The object's lights flickered, brightening, then dimming, as though reacting to her touch. A low voice boomed from the object once again, sending a chill through the crew. The language was still indecipherable, but the cadence of the voice felt urgent, insistent. It was as though the object was trying to impart knowledge, a knowledge humanity had never been meant to understand. "We need to document everything," Mia said quietly. "This is it. We're witnessing history." Back on Earth, the race was on. Space agencies across the world were scrambling to catch up, analyzing every scrap of data, every byte of information coming from Mars. The mystery of the object was capturing the world's attention like nothing before it. Political leaders, scientists, and ordinary people alike were watching in awe as the first steps were taken toward a new understanding of the universe. In Washington, President Emily Rodriguez stood before the press, her expression serious as she addressed the growing global tension. What we're witnessing is the beginning of something far greater than we could have ever anticipated. We don't know what the object on Mars represents, nor do we know what message it holds. But I promise you, we will act with the utmost care and diligence. This is not just about America or any single nation. This is about all of humanity coming together to understand what lies beyond our planet. The press conference was filled with murmurs, the weight of her words settling on the world's shoulders. There was no denying it anymore, humanity was no longer alone. But what did that mean? What would they find on Mars, or in the depths of space, that could forever alter the course of civilization? Meanwhile, Mia's team was racing against time. The object was growing more powerful by the hour, its hum pulsing through the Martian soil, as though it were awakening something hidden beneath the surface. Every time they tried to study it more closely, the energy pulses became more intense. Kevin looked up at Mia, his face pale. "Mia, something's happening. The energy readings, they're off the charts. Whatever this is, it's not just a message. It's building up to something." Mia nodded grimly. "We need to prepare for whatever comes next. We don't know if this is going to be a peaceful encounter, or if we're walking into a trap." They could all feel it now, the shift in the air, the growing sense of inevitability. The object was no longer a curiosity. It was a force that was beginning to affect the very atmosphere of Mars. On Earth, Elon Musk and Gwynne Shotwell watched as the data came in from Mars. They had sent teams of experts, and every resource SpaceX had was being funneled into understanding the object. The excitement was palpable, but so was the fear. "Elon," Gwynne began quietly, "I think we're crossing a threshold here. We've been focused on getting a response, but now that we're receiving it, I'm not sure we can control the outcome." "I know," Elon admitted, his voice steady despite the concern rising in his chest. "But humanity can't afford to stop now. We've reached a point where there's no turning back. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's the only way forward." Gwynne looked at him with a mix of admiration and apprehension. "You're right. But we need to prepare for every possible outcome. And we need to be ready for the unexpected." Elon nodded. "Agreed. We're all in this. Together." Back on Mars, Mia's team was struggling to make sense of the object's increasing energy. They knew that the key to understanding what was happening lay in the device, but no one knew if the object was simply a tool or something far more intricate, something that might change the fate of humanity itself. Mia stood at the forefront, watching the glowing, pulsating object. The world was watching, and they had already gone too far to turn back. "I don't know what this means," Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. "But one thing is clear, this is only the beginning. What happens next will shape the future of humanity." And with that, the countdown to discovery began. The pulses from the object were growing in frequency and intensity. Mia's team on Mars could feel the vibrations deep in their bones as they gathered around the mysterious device. The Martian winds howled outside the habitat, a constant reminder of the isolation and danger that surrounded them. But inside the small, confined space of the rover, it was the strange energy that held everyone's attention. Mia looked at the object once again, her brow furrowed in concentration. The device had started glowing brighter, the lights flickering in response to their movements. It was as if it was waiting for something. Or perhaps it was testing them. She couldn't quite tell, but she could feel the growing weight of its presence. The longer they studied it, the more it felt like a living, breathing entity. "We've never seen anything like this," Dr. Kevin Patel said, his voice trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. It's unlike anything in our databases. No metals, no known components. Whatever this is, it's from somewhere else. And it's sentient. We need to figure out its purpose, Mia replied, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. This isn't just an artifact. It's a signal. And if it's trying to communicate, we need to listen. The energy pulse from the device increased again, this time nearly vibrating the floor beneath their feet. The air in the room felt thicker, charged with an unseen force. Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was happening. Something big. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the international community was on edge. The entire planet had watched as the object on Mars responded to the astronauts' presence. People were talking about it everywhere, on news stations, social media, and in cafes. Everyone was waiting for the next move, the next discovery. Elon Musk and SpaceX had become the focal point of humanity's hopes and fears. Elon was seated in a conference room at SpaceX headquarters, surrounded by scientists and strategists. The atmosphere was tense. Every update from Mars was being scrutinized, and with each passing hour, the mystery deepened. "We've confirmed it," said one of the lead scientists, Dr. Alexander Reyes. "The object is emitting a type of energy we haven't been able to classify. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's deliberate." Elon leaned forward, his eyes sharp with focus. "You're saying the object is alive?" Dr. Reyes hesitated. "Not in the biological sense, but it is functioning like a complex system. It responds to stimuli, interacts with its environment. It's almost as if it's aware of us. This isn't just technology, it's something else." Elon sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always believed in the potential of the unknown, but this was beyond even his wildest dreams. They were staring at the dawn of a new era. "We need to prepare for more contact," Elon said, his voice resolute. "If this object is trying to communicate, we need to understand what it's saying before someone else does." On Mars, the tension was mounting. Mia and her team had set up new instruments to analyze the device, but every time they got close, the energy pulses intensified. The lights from the object flickered, casting long, haunting shadows across the rocky landscape. It was as if the object had its own heartbeat. "This is getting dangerous," Kevin said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're getting too close. We need to back off." Mia shook her head. "We can't stop now. We've come too far. We need to push through. Whatever this is, we need to understand it before it overwhelms us." The others exchanged nervous glances, but Mia's determination was palpable. She wasn't backing down. Not now. As they continued their work, the object began to hum louder, the pulse resonating through the ground beneath them. Mia felt her heart race. This was it. The object was no longer a passive artifact. It was alive, it was responding to them, and it was starting to reveal its secrets. Back in the SpaceX control room, the world watched as the data from Mars continued to pour in. The energy pulses were becoming more frequent and more intense, and the strange object was showing no signs of stopping. A sense of urgency was growing among the team in California. Elon paced the room, his thoughts consumed by the implications of what they were about to face. Whatever had been left behind on Mars was not something to be taken lightly. And the world was depending on SpaceX to lead the way. "What's the status on the decoding?" he asked, turning to Dr. Lindgren, the lead linguist who had been working tirelessly to decipher the messages from Mars. Dr. Lindgren looked up from her computer. "We're making progress, but it's slow. The patterns in the voice are unlike anything we've encountered before. It's not a language, it's more like a code. We think it's using frequencies to convey information. The problem is, we don't know how to translate it yet." Elon's jaw tightened. "We don't have time. Every minute that passes, we risk someone else making contact first. We need that translation, now. Back on Mars, the crew was still at the object. Mia reached out to touch it again, her gloved hand brushing against its surface. This time, the response was immediate. The object's lights flickered rapidly, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through their comm system. Mia's heart skipped a beat. The voice wasn't just sound, it was vibration, a force that seemed to travel through her very bones. It was as though the voice was calling to her personally. "We need to record this," Kevin said, his voice strained with the effort of focusing. "This is beyond anything we've ever encountered. If we can't translate it, we at least need to preserve it." Mia nodded, pulling out the device that would capture the frequencies. She glanced back at the team, who were all standing motionless, wide-eyed. They had crossed into uncharted territory. The moment they had been waiting for had arrived, and there was no going back. On Earth, Elon Musk watched as the data from Mars continued to stream in, his thoughts racing. He was on the phone with world leaders, coordinating the next steps. Everyone knew that the discovery on Mars was bigger than any space mission. It was bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. "This is it," Elon muttered to himself, looking at the screen where the strange object's energy readings flashed. "We're not just explorers anymore. We're the first to make contact. What will that contact mean for humanity?" As the energy pulse from Mars reached its peak, the world held its breath. The next few moments felt like an eternity. The energy levels from the object surged dramatically, almost as though it were building towards something. The voice reverberated again, louder this time, stronger, like a wave crashing over the team. And then, just as suddenly, the hum stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she turned to face her team. What just happened? But there was no time to answer. Something had changed. The world, as they knew it, was on the verge of a new era. The silence that followed the cessation of the hum felt unnatural, as if the very air had grown still and heavy. Mia's team stood frozen, their breath shallow, as the object on Mars seemed to lie dormant, its glowing lights dimming to an almost imperceptible glow. The Martian landscape outside their rover had not changed, but something had. They could feel it in their bones, in the very fabric of the world around them. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath. What just happened? Kevin's voice trembled, breaking the silence. His wide eyes met Mia's, a mixture of awe and dread swirling in them. Mia didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the object. It had ceased its strange, rhythmic pulse, but she could sense something else, an unease that gnawed at her, something that had shifted beneath the surface. A quiet hum still reverberated in the background, but it was faint, as if the object was waiting. Waiting for something. "Is it over?" Dr. Patel asked, adjusting the instruments that were still registering faint energy pulses. "The energy readings are starting to stabilize, but this isn't over, is it?" Mia shook her head. "No. This is just the beginning." She took a cautious step closer to the device, her gloved hand hovering above its surface. The air around it felt charged, electric, as though the object was preparing to reveal something more. Something hidden. Back at SpaceX's headquarters, Elon Musk paced back and forth in the control room. The moment the energy pulse had ceased, the world seemed to stop. The anticipation was unbearable, and every inch of Elon's being urged him to push forward, to uncover the next step in humanity's exploration. The object on Mars, whatever it was, held the key to a future none of them could predict. "Elon," Gwynne Shotwell said, her voice breaking into his thoughts. "We've received reports from the Mars team. The object has stopped emitting its intense pulses. But the scientists are unsure what's happening. We may have just entered a new phase. It's like the device is waiting for something." Elon stopped pacing and turned toward her. "A new phase? What does that mean?" Gwyn held up a tablet, displaying a series of energy readings. The pulses are subsiding, but they're not gone. The object is still active. Whatever it is, it seems like it's preparing for something. Elon's mind raced. We need to be ready for anything. If the object is waiting for a response, we can't afford to hesitate. Back on Mars, Mia's instincts screamed at her to be careful. The object had changed, its behavior had shifted from curiosity to something more ominous. She was acutely aware of the power that lay in the palm of their hands, and how fragile their position was. The entire world was watching, and if they made a mistake now, the consequences could be catastrophic. The team gathered around the rover's control panel, reviewing the data. The object's energy levels are stabilizing, Dr. Patel said, his brow furrowed. It's almost like it's entering a different state of being. Mia stepped back, her gaze fixed on the device. We need to try again. We need to make contact. We can't sit around waiting. This is our chance. Kevin exchanged an uneasy glance with Dr. Patel before nodding reluctantly. All right, Mia. We're with you. Let's see what happens next. In the control room back on Earth, the pressure was mounting. The entire world was on edge. News networks were broadcasting the data from Mars non-stop. What would happen next? Would the astronauts find a way to communicate with the object? Or was this the beginning of something far more dangerous? Elon sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his team of experts. He could feel the weight of the moment. Everything was riding on the next move. We need a plan, Elon said, his voice calm but urgent. We don't know what this object wants, but we can't afford to make the wrong decision. Gwyn nodded. We need to communicate with the team on Mars. Let them know we're ready to support whatever they need. If we don't act now, we risk losing our window of opportunity. Elon stood up, walking toward the large digital map of Mars that was projected on the wall. He traced his finger across the surface. If this thing is trying to communicate, then we need to give it the platform. We need to be ready to listen, and to understand. But we also need to prepare for the unexpected. This could be the most dangerous thing humanity has ever faced. Mia felt her heart race as the device flickered once again, the faint hum growing louder, more intense. Something was happening. I think it's responding, Dr. Patel said, looking at his instrument panel. The signals coming from the object were no longer random, they were becoming structured, as though they were forming a pattern, a language. Mia's breath caught in her throat. It's starting. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The object pulsed with energy, and for the briefest of moments, the entire rover seemed to shake. The walls vibrated, and the floor beneath them seemed to tremble. Then, just as quickly, the hum stopped. The object fell silent once more. But this time, something was different. A low-frequency voice, like a whisper carried on the wind, echoed through the comm system. The crew stiffened, their eyes wide in disbelief. The voice, though faint, was unmistakable. We are waiting. It was the same voice they had heard before, but now it was clearer, more distinct. And it carried an unmistakable sense of urgency. Back on Earth, Elon Musk listened intently to the transmission from Mars. His pulse quickened as the words reverberated through the speakers. We are waiting. The message was clear, this was no longer just an object. It was an invitation. An invitation to what? What do you think it means? Gwyn asked, her eyes glued to the screen. Elon leaned forward, his gaze intense. It means we're not alone. This is the moment. The beginning of everything. On Mars, Mia and her team were stunned. The message wasn't just a statement, it was a call to action. We are waiting. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mia's mind raced. Waiting for what? What was the object waiting for? What did it mean by that? We need to figure this out, she said, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions coursing through her. "We can't afford to miss this opportunity." The team quickly gathered around the rover's console, typing in commands to attempt to respond to the voice, to open a dialogue. They had to know what the object wanted, and they had to be ready for the consequences of that knowledge. As the crew on Mars began their attempts to decode the message further, Elon stood at the head of a global team on Earth, watching the data pour in from the rover. "Whatever happens next, we have to be ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. The world was watching. And humanity had just crossed into a new era. The air inside the Mars rover had thickened with the weight of anticipation. Mia and her team stood around the command panel, staring at the screen as they waited for the next signal. The voice had faded out, leaving behind a charged silence that stretched for what felt like an eternity. But the message, "We are waiting," lingered in the air, echoing in their minds, urging them to act. The enormity of the moment was palpable. They were no longer just explorers. They were the first humans in history to make contact with an intelligence beyond their own. Mia took a deep breath and turned to her team. "We need to respond. Whatever waiting means, we can't leave this unanswered." Kevin was the first to speak up, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "But how? We have no idea what kind of response it's looking for. We've only just started to understand the nature of the signals. We could be misinterpreting everything." Dr. Patel added, "Exactly. The data we've gathered is inconclusive at best. We still don't even know what kind of technology this is, or what it's made of. It's like nothing we've ever seen." Mia nodded, but her eyes were hard, determined. "We're here for a reason. We're the first ones to find this. The rest of humanity is waiting. We can't sit idly by. We have to try." The team exchanged uneasy glances. There was no choice. If they hesitated now, the opportunity could slip away. The world would never forgive them if they didn't take the next step. "All right," Kevin said after a long pause, "but we need to be cautious. We can't just respond without knowing what we're dealing with." Mia took another deep breath and typed a sequence of commands into the rover's console. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she steadied them, knowing that this moment was about far more than herself. It was about everyone. About humanity. She hit send. Initiating response. The screens on the rover flickered, and for a brief second, Mia thought the device might react immediately. But then, nothing. The silence stretched on, suffocating. They all waited, not daring to breathe, watching the screens as if their very lives depended on it. Seconds turned into minutes. Finally, the silence was broken. The hum began again, this time even more intense, as though the object itself was drawing energy from the very air around them. The lights in the rover flickered. The energy levels spiked. Something was happening. And then, just like that, the voice came again. "We are ready." The words filled the rover, vibrating through the walls, vibrating through Mia's very body. The sensation was otherworldly, almost as if the sound itself was more than just noise, it was a force, an invitation, a beckoning call to the unknown. Mia's heart raced as she processed the words. "We are ready." Ready for what? Ready for them? For contact. For a new phase of their existence. Mia's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Ready for what? What does this mean? Her team had no answers. None of them knew. They all stood in stunned silence, their eyes glued to the screen, waiting for the next wave of communication. But nothing came. Back on Earth, the control room at SpaceX was alive with activity. Elon Musk stood, staring at the stream of data coming in from Mars. The world was watching, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle. "We are ready," the voice had said. The message was clear. But what did it mean? And what was the next move? "Elon," Gwynne Shotwell said, her voice breaking into his thoughts. We've been analyzing the frequencies coming from Mars. Our team at the lab thinks we might be able to send a response. But we need more information. We can't just act blindly. Elon nodded, his fingers tapping the edge of the table. We don't have the luxury of time. The world is watching. We need to make contact. Whatever this is, we need to be ready. He turned toward Dr. Lindgren, the linguist who had been tirelessly working to decode the messages. Any progress on the patterns? Dr. Lindgren looked up from her monitor, her face drawn with exhaustion. We're close. But the voice isn't exactly a language. It's more like a code, a complex system of frequencies that are unlike anything we've encountered before. We might be able to respond with something, but it's going to take time. Time we may not have. Elon frowned, glancing back at the stream of data from Mars. I don't have time. Neither does the world. We need to act now. Back on Mars, Mia's mind was whirling. The voice had spoken again, this time with more urgency. We are ready. But ready for what? Was the object preparing to reveal something? Or was it awaiting something more? The uncertainty was maddening, but Mia couldn't let doubt overtake her. She had to take action. We need to reach out, she said, her voice firm. We can't keep standing here wondering. We've got one chance at this. Kevin looked hesitant but nodded. All right. Let's do it. Mia quickly typed in another series of commands, sending out a new wave of signals toward the object. It was a calculated risk, but it was the only option they had left. She sent a series of pulses, carefully matching the frequencies they had been monitoring. For a few moments, nothing happened. But then, the object responded. The hum intensified again. The screen in front of them blinked to life. And then, for the first time since the crew had discovered the object, the words came through the comms system in a language they could understand. Welcome, children of Earth. The voice was soft but authoritative, as though it had known for eons that humanity would one day arrive. A strange, powerful wave of emotion surged through Mia. Fear, excitement, awe, they all mingled together in a chaotic storm within her. Welcome. What do you mean by that? Mia whispered aloud, though she knew the voice couldn't hear her. But the voice responded again, as though answering her question before it was even asked. Your kind has much to learn. But there is time. Much time. Mia's heart thudded in her chest. This was it. This was the beginning of something monumental. They had made contact, but now the real challenge lay ahead. The object had spoken. It had acknowledged them. And it had given them an invitation. We are ready. On Earth, Elon watched the transmission from Mars, the words still ringing in his ears. Children of Earth. The phrase seemed to echo across time, sending chills down his spine. What did it mean? Who, or what, was waiting? Elon's mind raced, but there was one thing he knew for certain: humanity had just crossed a threshold. There was no going back now. We need to be ready, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Whatever this is, we have to be prepared. The world is watching. And as the data continued to pour in, he realized the most profound truth of all: this was just the beginning. The comms system crackled as Mia and her team sat frozen in the rover. The words still echoed in their minds. Welcome, children of Earth. The sheer magnitude of the message was overwhelming. Everything they had worked for, every theory, every mission, had led them to this moment. It was no longer just about exploration, it was about revelation. About uncovering a truth that had been hidden for eons. A truth that was now waiting for them to discover. Mia sat in the command seat, her fingers hovering over the console. The transmission had been brief, cryptic, but undeniably significant. And yet, it left them with more questions than answers. Your kind has much to learn. But there is time. Much time. The words echoed in her mind like a whisper, urging her to act. They couldn't waste any more time guessing what this meant. They had to know what came next. Okay, Mia said, her voice firm as she turned to her team. We need to respond. If this object is communicating with us, we can't afford to sit back and wait. Let's push forward. Dr. Patel and Kevin nodded, their faces reflecting the same mixture of excitement and trepidation that Mia felt. They had come this far, and now, there was no turning back. All right, Kevin said, taking a deep breath. We're going to need more than just basic signals. We need to show them that we understand the seriousness of this. Let's send something meaningful. Mia nodded in agreement, but before she could issue the command, a strange new signal pulsed through the comm system. This one was different. It was a frequency unlike any they had heard before, an intricate sequence of tones that seemed to resonate deep in their bones. The hairs on the back of Mia's neck stood up. What is that? Kevin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Mia replied, her fingers flying over the controls, adjusting the systems to analyze the strange signal. The frequency was long, too long to be a mere glitch, and there was something almost melodic about it, a series of sounds that seemed to mimic an ancient language. It was as though the object was trying to reach them in a deeper, more profound way than they had anticipated. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a new message came through. This is the first step. The voice was clear, stronger now, carrying an authority that sent a chill through Mia. But this time, there was more. There was a sense of urgency in its tone, an insistence that they follow whatever path the object was setting before them. Mia exchanged a glance with Kevin and Dr. Patel. The implications of this message were staggering. The first step. What did it mean? What did they need to do next? We're on the verge of something incredible, Mia said, trying to steady her racing heart. But we can't do this blindly. We need to understand what the object is asking for. Dr. Patel, always the analytical one, began to pull up more data. I've been analyzing the pulse sequences, and I think we may have cracked part of it. This could be a set of instructions, a blueprint for interaction. But it's going to take time to decipher. We don't have much time, Kevin said, his voice tense. What if the object doesn't wait forever? What if there's a deadline? Mia didn't have an answer. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. They had come to Mars to explore, to learn, but now it was something else. They had stumbled upon something far more ancient, far more important, and they had no idea where it was going to lead. Let's take the next step, Mia said, making her decision. We can't afford to second guess. We've made contact. Now we have to show that we're ready to listen. Back on Earth, Elon Musk paced restlessly in his control room. The news of the transmission had taken the world by storm, and the pressure on his shoulders was immense. Every move he made, every decision, carried the weight of humanity's future. We're still not clear on what this object is, Elon muttered, his gaze fixed on the screen. But we need to be ready for anything. Gwyn Shotwell, who had been coordinating with the Mars team, spoke up. Elon, we've been scanning the data. We might be able to send a response back. Dr. Lindgren thinks she has a better understanding of the tone patterns, but it's a long shot. She believes we might be able to construct a response, but it's going to require some adjustments to our transmission protocols. Elon nodded thoughtfully, though his mind was elsewhere. We don't have the luxury of time. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come to us. If this thing is giving us a sequence, we need to match it. It's a message, and we need to show we understand. Elon's eyes narrowed. Prepare the transmission. We'll work with what we have. I don't care if it's imperfect. We need to show them that we're not just some random species stumbling through space, we're capable of something more. On Mars, Mia and her team prepared to send the next sequence of signals. It felt like everything was culminating in this moment. The pressure was palpable. She could feel the weight of the eyes of the world on her shoulders. What if they failed? What if they couldn't unlock the mysteries of this device? Mia's hands trembled as she began entering the frequency patterns into the console. They were doing it, responding to the object's invitation. The object had opened a door, and now, they were stepping through it. Kevin looked over at Mia. This could change everything. Do you think we're ready for whatever comes next? Mia hesitated, but then a calmness settled over her. We have no choice. We've come this far. We have to take that first step. She hit send, and the transmission was sent out, a series of coded pulses that echoed out into the vast, silent Martian atmosphere. They waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, suddenly, the object's hum shifted. It was more than a hum now, it was a rhythmic, pulsing beat, like the heartbeat of some ancient, distant being. The energy levels began to rise again, but this time, it was different. This time, the object seemed to respond more quickly, more forcefully. The voice returned. You have chosen the path. Now you must walk it. The words seemed to reverberate through the rover, as though they were being etched into the very fabric of space and time itself. Mia swallowed hard, her pulse racing. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The object had acknowledged their response, and now, the real challenge began. We have chosen the path, Mia whispered. But what comes next? Back on Earth, Elon Musk's breath caught in his chest as he listened to the transmission from Mars. The voice had spoken again, louder this time, more definitive. You have chosen the path. Do you realize what this means? Elon said to Gwyn, his voice low but filled with awe. This is bigger than anything we imagined. We're no longer just explorers. We're participants in something far beyond our understanding. Gwyn nodded, her face a mix of wonder and concern. The first step has been taken. But now, the world needs to prepare for the consequences. We don't know what's coming, but we can't back down now. Elon stood silent for a moment, staring at the data streaming in. One thought kept running through his mind: humanity had just stepped onto a path that could change everything. The future was here. And it was far stranger, and more dangerous, than they ever imagined. The transmission from Mars had left the team in a state of disbelief. Mia sat in the rover, staring at the screen where the message still lingered: You have chosen the path. Now you must walk it. The words were simple, but the weight of them was overwhelming. What did it mean to walk the path? Was it a challenge? A test? Or was it something more? She turned to Dr. Patel, her mind racing with the possibilities. What do you think it means? She asked. Do you think we're being invited to something? Or is it a warning? Dr. Patel, who had been scanning the data for hours, paused. His expression was grave. I'm not sure. The frequency patterns are unlike anything we've encountered before. The pulse we sent out was reciprocated, but now the object's behavior is changing. It's almost like it's adapting to us. Kevin, who had been quietly monitoring the rover's systems, spoke up. Whatever it is, we need to be careful. We don't know what this thing is capable of, or how it will react if we push too hard. Mia's mind was filled with conflicting emotions: curiosity, fear, excitement, but above all, a sense of urgency. They had no choice but to continue. They had chosen this path, whether they realized it or not. There was no going back now. Let's proceed cautiously, she said. We need to make contact again. The world is waiting for us to move forward, but we have to make sure we do it in a way that doesn't escalate things too quickly. Mia's hands hovered over the console, and with a deep breath, she entered a new set of coordinates, an adjustment to their previous frequency. The rover hummed as the signal shot out, vibrating the air around them. Moments later, the comms system crackled to life. Welcome, travelers. The voice had returned, softer this time, but with an undeniable power that sent a shiver down Mia's spine. It was as though the object was not just acknowledging them as humans, but as something greater, something that had crossed an unimaginable threshold. Travelers? Kevin muttered under his breath, his eyes wide. Is it talking to us like we're not just explorers? Like we're part of something else? Mia didn't know the answer. She could barely understand the implications herself. But there was no time to hesitate. They needed to press on. We are here, Mia said, speaking into the comms. We're ready to learn. What do you want us to do? For a moment, the rover fell silent, the tension mounting. Then, the voice came again. Answer the call. The path awaits. Mia's heart pounded. What did this mean? Was it another puzzle? Or was this a command? The phrasing, the path awaits, was unmistakable. It sounded almost prophetic. Answer the call. Kevin echoed, his voice trembling. What does that even mean? Dr. Patel was already examining the data on his tablet. I think we've reached a critical point. The object is directing us now. Whatever it is, it's no longer just responding to us. It's guiding us. Mia could feel the weight of the moment. She had always dreamed of this, of reaching Mars, of making history. But now, it wasn't about exploration anymore. This was something much bigger. The question wasn't how they would continue, it was what they were walking into. Back on Earth, Elon Musk was pacing again, his mind racing. He had been watching the data from Mars constantly, following every shift, every transmission, every word. His thoughts were a blur of excitement and trepidation. They had made contact. They had chosen the path. But what came next? He turned to Gwyn Shotwell, who had been quietly observing the data alongside him. What do you think it means? The path awaits. What does it want from us? Gwyn hesitated. It's like we've crossed a threshold. We've always known that Mars held mysteries, but this is something different. Something far beyond our understanding. It's like they're leading us towards something. Elon nodded slowly, his thoughts turning inward. I've always believed that humanity was destined for something greater than itself. But now it's real. We're standing on the edge of a new era. Whatever this is, we need to be ready for it. We can't afford to wait any longer. Gwyn gave a small nod. The world's already watching. Whatever happens next, it's going to change everything. Elon's voice was quiet, but resolute. Then we need to be prepared for the unknown. There's no turning back. Back on Mars, Mia's hands were steady as she inputted the latest set of coordinates. She wasn't sure what the next step would bring, but the weight of their mission was clear. The world was waiting. Humanity was watching. They couldn't afford to fail. We've been chosen, Mia said softly, her voice filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. But for what? What are we meant to do? The comms crackled again. This time, the message wasn't a voice, it was something else. A series of rapidly fluctuating pulses that seemed to form a complex pattern. A pattern that Mia recognized. It's the same pattern we saw earlier, Dr. Patel said, his voice tight with urgency. But now it's more pronounced. It's definitely intentional. Mia's eyes widened as she processed the sequence. It was a blueprint, a map, a set of instructions. She didn't know how, but she could feel it. This wasn't just a message, this was a call to action. They were being led somewhere. We have to follow this, Mia said, her voice unwavering. Whatever comes next, we need to understand it. We've made contact, and now we have to answer. Kevin nodded, his expression grim but resolute. Let's do it. They began preparing the rover to follow the path laid out by the mysterious pulses. The unknown journey had begun, and they were no longer just participants, they were active players in a much larger game. What awaited them, they couldn't say. But they had to take that first step. For the sake of humanity. For the sake of everything they had worked for. Back on Earth, the world held its breath as the news of the latest transmission hit the headlines. The message from Mars had been decoded, but the world had no idea what it truly meant. The mystery deepened with every passing hour. In the control room at SpaceX, Elon Musk sat in front of the screens, his eyes locked on the data. Whatever happens next, he murmured, it will change the course of history. This is only the beginning. As the transmission from Mars continued to unfold, the world braced itself for the unknown. What would the next message bring? What was the object on Mars waiting for? And, most importantly, what had humanity just set in motion? Mia's fingers were cold as she gripped the controls of the rover, her mind racing. The sequence of pulses had been clear, the object was guiding them, step by step, toward something. But what? Every part of her had been trained for exploration, for science, for discovery. But none of that had prepared her for this. No one had ever imagined that they would be standing at the threshold of an encounter like this. What's on the other side of this? Kevin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the question that had been on all their minds, but none of them had dared to speak it aloud until now. Mia swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The Martian landscape stretched out before them, barren and still, but it no longer felt empty. The object that had led them here was no longer just an anomaly, it was something more. A presence. A force. She could almost feel its eyes on them, watching their every move. We're about to find out, Mia said quietly, a sense of finality in her voice. The rover's systems hummed softly as they followed the pulses, tracing the intricate pattern that had been laid out for them. The land before them shifted, as if responding to the guidance they were receiving. It wasn't just a physical path they were following, it was a journey of discovery, an awakening to something far beyond their comprehension. As they traveled, the atmosphere in the rover shifted. The once uncertain tension had transformed into something else, something electric, full of anticipation. Every moment felt like it was building to something. Something monumental. Then, they saw it. The object. It wasn't just a metallic structure anymore. It had changed. No longer hidden beneath the surface, it now stood before them, tall, imposing, and unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't just an artifact or a relic. It was alive. The ground trembled as the object responded to their approach. A massive energy field surrounded it, pulsing with rhythmic energy, almost as if it were breathing. The air crackled with static electricity, and the rover's instruments began to malfunction as they drew closer. It was as though the very fabric of their technology couldn't keep up with what they were witnessing. Is it alive? Dr. Patel whispered, his voice shaky with awe. I don't know, Mia replied, her eyes locked on the strange, shifting form in front of them. But whatever it is, it's not like anything we've ever encountered. It's not just technology, it's something else. The energy around the object began to intensify. Mia could feel it vibrating through her bones, resonating with the pulses they had sent, as though the object was acknowledging their presence, preparing them for what came next. Then, the comm system crackled to life again, this time with a new message, one that reverberated deep within their souls. You have come far. But the path is not yet complete. The voice was more than just sound, it was something that seemed to penetrate their minds, bypassing language entirely. It spoke directly to their consciousness. It spoke not in words, but in meaning. The object was communicating with them on a level beyond comprehension. What does it want from us? Kevin asked, his voice full of wonder and fear. We have to finish the journey, Mia said, her voice firm. We've come too far to turn back now. Mia steeled herself, knowing that this moment would define everything. They were no longer just scientists, explorers, or dreamers. They were participants in something greater than any of them had ever imagined. The path was set before them, and there was no turning back. Without another word, Mia activated the rover's main systems, guiding them toward the object. As they moved closer, the object seemed to respond, its surface rippling with energy, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. The air around them hummed with power. It was a living force, but not in the way they understood life. It was a fusion of biology and technology, ancient and futuristic all at once. Suddenly, the object began to shift, its structure opening like a massive flower, revealing a hidden core, something glowing, something at the heart of it all. "It's a portal," Dr. Patel breathed, his voice filled with awe. "It's not just a structure, it's a doorway." The portal shimmered before them, its surface swirling with brilliant colors that defied description. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending around them, distorting and shifting in ways that defied all logic. The object, this massive, alien structure, was not a thing of the past. It was a living, breathing doorway to something far beyond their understanding. "Are we supposed to go in?" Kevin asked, his voice barely audible. Mia didn't answer at first. She couldn't. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and every instinct told her to step back, to retreat from the unknown. But then, something inside her, something deep and primal, pushed her forward. This was their destiny. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. "We have to," Mia said, her voice steady with determination. "This is why we're here." With that, she guided the rover toward the portal, feeling the overwhelming sense of something monumental, something beyond their control, pulling them in. The air around them hummed louder, the energy intensifying with each passing second. As they entered the glowing portal, everything around them seemed to warp. Time and space no longer held the same meaning. The familiar world of Mars, with its dusty red landscape, faded away, replaced by an endless, surreal expanse. The feeling was indescribable. It was as if they were no longer on Mars, no longer even on Earth, but somewhere else entirely, in a space between worlds, between dimensions. The very laws of physics seemed to bend and warp, creating a sense of vertigo that threatened to overwhelm them. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The rover came to a gentle halt, and Mia blinked, trying to adjust to the new surroundings. The world outside was dark, but not in the way they had expected. It wasn't the absence of light, it was the presence of something else, something that bathed everything in an eerie glow. The terrain was unrecognizable, alien in every sense of the word. The air was thick with a strange energy, as if the very atmosphere carried a hum, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the core of their beings. Mia slowly unbuckled herself from the rover's seat and stepped outside, her boots crunching on the strange ground beneath her. The rest of the team followed, each of them equally awestruck by the enormity of the moment. In front of them stood what could only be described as a structure of unimaginable complexity, an alien city, perhaps, or some sort of monument. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, its architecture not bound by the constraints of earthly design. The shapes were fluid, ever-changing, as though the very essence of the structure was alive, growing and shifting before their eyes. Mia took a deep breath. This was it. They had arrived. And now, the real journey began. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?